Senator Booth, you got to hold on 1 second, okay? Because we got to get this online first.
Yeah, wait, yeah, because I'm having people text me that they can't see us yet.
Yeah, hold on.
It says it's streaming now.
Okay, so hold on. Let me go back to my Zoom here. Okay, we are on. So I have, okay, I just want to make sure, mute, Ingram's mute, not muted, not muted.
They still can't see it though.
Peggy, I have just looked online and your meeting is streaming on YouTube now.
Okay.
Oh, it is, okay. Oh, great, okay, good.
I think pretty much everybody is muted.
Okay, so except the committee members.
Yeah, let me mute myself now too, okay?
Okay. Okay, and if you can unmute Superintendent Obeng. Superintendent, can you speak to us now?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, great.
Again, welcome. And just to repeat what I said before, we're looking for some on-the-ground kind of expert testimony on what's happening post-governor's order with general dismissal, continuity of education plans, food service, and then any childcare you're supervising. And just to cut to the chase, we are hoping to get a clear picture of what's happening, but what we're really wondering is there anything that you need that has to be done in law or statute rather than by executive order or rule? So with that, feel free to jump in wherever you want, and at a certain point, we'll stop for questions.
All right, excellent. So first of all, thank you for this opportunity. This is great that the committee is reaching out to superintendents and people on the ground to find out exactly what's happening. And I'll start off by giving just a quick overview of what's happening. And I'm sure my colleague, Jeannie Collins, I think is on here in terms of representing superintendent's needs. We can talk about some of the things that maybe you can do to help us moving forward. So I'll try to be as expeditious as possible in my review, and then I'm really open for questions and suggestions around the items here. Some of you might have noticed yesterday we did do a YouTube press conference to the community to give an update around the number of things that we were working on. And people can go to our website. We do have a coronavirus prep website that has information right from the governor's order right to implementation pieces at our ground level. Let me share with you food services, because that's one that's been a big success for us, and that credit goes to our Doug Davis, our food services director, and the food services workers who've been planning prior to closure and how we would implement this. And they've kind of really taken our snow day plan in terms of how we feed students when it's a snow day, and also our summer plan when we feed anyone under the age of 21 in Burlington. So that's been adjusted. So last week we provided 3,000 meals at 11 different sites for food, and we've had families come forward and grab multiple meals at a time in many cases, and have distributed to people all over. And we're also advertising that this is not just open to our students, but anyone who's under 18 is free to come and pick up food. And we've had family members and parents and things come as well to do that. So that's been a good success. We were stockpiling food prior to preparing for the closure. So I think we have enough to last us in the short term anyways. Who knows what's going to happen down the road. So that's a little bit on the food services thing. I'm sure you'll have some specific questions. The big challenge that districts are having right now is around childcare in terms of how to do that. And one of the things we have a childcare team, and we came up with a childcare plan we're calling a hybrid childcare plan, which has two different foci around that. And we kind of went beyond the guidance I was giving, the 10-to-1, and we really looked at and working with some of the doctors who are on our health team in terms of how do we mitigate risk and keep people apart and try to reduce exposure. We're going to like a 1-to-1, a 1-to-3, and in some cases 1-to-5. support for childcare. So the first option, which really mitigates opportunity for exposure, is for people to have opportunities in their homes. And so we made a proposal to the state that we wanted to subsidize either our staff or volunteers to work with families in their homes, because we knew already that families had probably had a line on people who'd be available to come to their homes and continue to monitor their children. And so that's one way to keep them away from other parties and also from our staff. The option B is the school site piece, in terms of having a school site where we have an entry. Parents are going to get a sheet in terms of things they need to do prior to dropping off their child. It's a health check in terms of questions around, have they done temperature testing and any current illnesses or anything like that. And when they arrive, they'll be met with one of our nurses who will do a temperature gauge and some health questions, and they'll have their provider. And once again, we're doing it per family. So it might be just one provider to one child, or to three children, or to five. And that way, that person is with that individual for the entire duration of the closure, and that mitigates the opportunity to transfer any sort of virus to other people. They will be in an enclosed space in the school site. So we've identified rooms that have sinks, running water, and restroom facilities, and also an outside door. So their program will be in the classroom or going outside, and not through the school in any way, and not engaging with other families within that. And we think that's the best approach to stave off the spread and not have any contact with others during that period. So a number of people did. So we were fortunate enough that our paras and after school staff volunteer for this role. We put a survey out asking for things that they're willing to do, and we had enough to do that. We've reached out to many families. We had about 70 families that identified as essential workers, and we had our staff start calling after the survey, start calling and identifying who really needed work. And so the response really was that they're okay right now for the majority, but they will be needing something in the future. And so we've kind of marked that down. And many of them have resolved their healthcare needs, because sometimes if they have two partners, one is at home now from work and the other one's the essential worker, so they're sustaining that. So that's been a good response in terms of being able to deal with the heavy load. So we're opening tomorrow, and we will have a number of students who will arrive, will be able to service. But I know that my colleagues around the state are having some challenges because they don't have the staff, or we haven't gotten the full direction from the state in terms of the parameters around that. But we're fully ready to move forward and do that. The last piece I'll talk about is around the curriculum and continuous improvement. So right now we're in the maintenance of learning. So the materials that we've given to teachers and to students to work with, it's just maintenance in terms of keeping them sort of the synapse and the cognitive abilities moving, but we're not looking at any progression in terms of assessment or any growth in learning. We just want to maintain. The main focus is around safety and well-being and health, right? So I know even some teachers are starting to use their restorative practices strategies that we've used in our schools to maintain healthy environments for our students. So that's our main focus. We're trying to focus. But as we move forward, depending what happens and we have an extended stay, we'll have to look at the next level in the continuing learning in terms of how do we really deliver instruction and assess and progress with our students. So that's a challenge. Some of the challenges that we had around technology, obviously we are in a community and other communities experience this as well, may not have access to internet, first of all, but we do have Bellington Telecom and Comcast that stepped up and had offered free internet for the next several months for any of our families. And then we had the other challenge around people having personal devices, and we're in the process of distributing Chromebooks to students who don't have access within our system. And I think we're going to be able to maintain. I haven't heard from staff yet that we're deficient in that, but so far it's been going quite well. We've also closed off any parent conferences and all the extrinsic contacts and things that we normally do, so teachers can focus on that learning piece and prepare for the future, and also take care of their own families as well. some of the questions around the learning piece is two vulnerable groups that we serve are EL learners. We're fortunate we've got a really good EL team with multilingual liaisons working with our director, and they've been contacting families personally by phone and giving instruction and also modifying the curriculum because it's really hard to do online materials for that particular group. In our special ed group, we had our special ed team develop continuing learning plans for this closure. And I'm happy to say that our team were pretty good. They've developed over 700 plans for this period of time. So that means individualized plans for students, but they are experiencing some challenges around being able to meet the rigor and diversity of the range of students. And we have some students that are in such need that, electronic platform is not enough. And we're finding it difficult to respond to those individuals. So I hope the state still maintains that we're not accountable for sort of any sort of assessment or movement for those students, because that's very difficult to do in this form.
Superintendent, your voice is fading out a little bit.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
So the last thing I'll say is one of the things that we've tried to work with in talking with our students is around not social distancing, but physical distancing. We want them to keep being social online, connecting with their friends, but we've had experiences where we've been seeing numbers of individuals, the students out together. They want to have the play dates, they want to get together, especially the adolescents, but that doesn't help stave off the spread. So we're trying to push that message right now in terms of having parents and students be aware that in order to keep this thing down, we have to have some quarantine and isolation during that. So that's a quick overview, and I'll leave that. I'm sure we'll have an opportunity to talk about some of the other challenges and answer some questions as we move forward.
Okay, thank you, Superintendent. Committee, what I'll do is I have a couple of questions that I've written down. I'll ask those, and then I'll pull the committee for questions, and then we'll move to Superintendent Collins. My first question, and again, these are pointed at, are there places where you might need some sort of statutory change to avoid running counter to law? I know that your food service program has been amazing. I've heard from a number of people about it. You said 3,000 meals at 11 sites. I think I heard you say that anybody could pick up a meal, anyone under 18, whether they were your student or not. Did I hear that right?
That is accurate. Yeah, we're open to anyone that's under 18 can be provided with meals. Yeah.
Okay, is that, I'm curious because under the normal state of play, I would think that at least some of the federal money would be tied to students in the district, and you'd have to make sure that they were. Is this an additional flexibility that you wouldn't normally have?
No, we always exercise this flexibility. We run a pretty efficient process where we actually do provide external services with our food services and generate some revenue. So we're able to provide other meals to community members on different.
I see.
So, yeah.
Okay, well that's great. And then my other question was, you were talking about the hybrid childcare plan, and you were talking about home care, and I'm wondering if you could just clarify a little bit. So if you have a child of an essential worker that needs care, they have somebody hooked up to provide that care, what would the district then do in that situation?
Yeah, well, we have staff that would call them, and we do a survey in terms of clarifying the analysis in terms of who they are, what their needs are, and if they're currently in our system, and they may have one of our paraeducators that's already connected to their children. So we'll try to make that match if we can.
Mm-hmm.
If not, then we go to the secondary level where we have one of our volunteers that we'd be able to connect with them. But we've had calls already where we've contacted people and they've said, "Oh, we have somebody who we're using that we use," and those are the easiest matches, right? And if they happen to be one of our staff, then we can say, "Okay, well, that becomes your role, and you can continue to stay with that family throughout the course of the closure," and that mitigates any transfers of any sort of virus there.
And then I guess what I'm curious about is the person, if they've hooked up somebody themselves, does state subsidy money flow in that case?
Well, that's where it gets complicated because hopefully, what we've had thus far, the people who they've found someone themselves, they're usually saying, we're okay, take care of someone else, right?
I see.
So we're just offering that if there's those situations where people have setups already with maybe some of our staff and they can do it in home, then we can look at subsidizing that piece. And we've shared this with the AOE in terms of, maybe what I'll do is I'll send you our proposal that we had.
That would be great. That would be great because it sounds like you're doing exactly what we're hoping people are doing.
Right.
I'm just wondering if there's a way we can facilitate, but it sounds like AOE is on board with what you're
I think there might
what you're
be.
rolling
I
out.
have to get back to you because I only got confirmation today, and some of the challenges might be logistical. Man, we thought about how we could do it, but we may need your support in terms of the financial piece, right? To ensure that we can transfer money and subsidize rather than paying them directly.
Yeah.
So I certainly will send you a proposal and look for your support and any suggestions you may have.
Okay, thank you, Superintendent. So committee members, if you can just say your first name if you have a question and I'll queue you up.
Ruth.
Ruth. Okay, hearing no others, why don't you go ahead, Ruth?
Thank you. And thank you, Superintendent Obang. It sounds like you guys are doing a great job in Burlington, and I'm just really glad to hear that, given that you're one of our biggest, or maybe the biggest school district in the state. I also am curious about, I've been doing, in fact, just before this, and the reason I was late to this call is I was on with Commissioner Ken Schatz at CDD talking about childcare issues. And so I'm curious about I think I understand what you're doing with home care, but do you have students coming to your buildings for care too? It sounded like you did, and could you just explain that again?
Yes, we're taking a two-pronged approach, a hybrid approach. We have looking at the home care piece, but we do have a site, which will be at one of our schools where students will be brought by their parents to our provider, to one of our instructors at the school. And then there's a health check, and then they're with that single person for the entire day, and we feed them, they go outside, and then they return the next day.
So it's a one-on-one or maybe just siblings on one kind of situation.
So we're going to do families. So whether there's one child might be kindergarten, one child might be third grade, one child might be fifth grade, but we're going to just keep families together and try to keep the isolation and not cross families over.
That makes so much sense. I'm so glad to hear you're doing that. There's a lot of concern around the state among childcare providers about, exposure to COVID-19. So it makes a lot of sense what you're doing, I think, and I'm glad to hear you have the capacity. I'm also wondering, are you just doing pre-K through 12, or are you providing infant and toddler care at all through the school?
No, we're not providing infant and toddler care, but we have made a suggestion that 0 to 5 could use the model that we're doing for the home care, because based on our surveys, there are people out there who are willing to step up and do that, and some of them are already childcare workers.
Yep.
And we're not doing the middle school or high school level students. We're sticking with for the school sites, it's K to 5 at this point. We feel that middle schoolers and high schoolers should be able to sustain themselves during this period, but we'll review that next week. If there's a great demand for sixth graders, maybe there might be something like that.
Right. Okay. That's good. I would love to see your plan so I can share it out with my colleagues who have concerns about how their districts are approaching this. The subsidies are really for the child care, the 0 to 5. Those subsidies are not relevant to elementary school kids. So I'm assuming you're not getting subsidy payments for your elementary school kids.
Well, no, we're not. No, we'll be using our existing budgets.
Right.
So we have staff that we're paying.
Right.
To do work. So we're using those staff so we wouldn't be able to do it if we didn't have those staff doing that work, right? So
right. Okay, understood. And I also appreciate that you're finding parents and families who have already made other arrangements, even though they are on the essential list, workers list. So that's great to hear too. Thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ruth. Other committee members, questions for Superintendent Obeng?
Jim?
Go ahead, Jim.
Yes, Superintendent. Are you providing protective clothing or anything for these employees going into the home or at school?
Well,
Before these?
let me address the home piece first. We've only had to support one case of the home piece, and that they had a pre-existing relationship with that family, so there was no need to provide because they're already exposed and they're staying within that cohort. But we don't have any equipment, and that's one of the challenges that we have in terms of PPEs. And I was hoping the state would provide us with some materials. But we do have doctors on our healthcare team, and we've gone through the process in terms of our school site, what the appropriate disinfecting process should be, and what the monitor we need to do with the parents and families prior to them arriving to mitigate any opportunity for transference. And matter of fact, our doctors had said that our nurses don't even require masks because of, I don't want to get into the technical stuff, I'm not a medical practitioner, but around the droplets and all of that they could sustain in terms of the way we're going to do it. There's not direct contact with those individuals, but we would welcome any sort of PPEs to support our staff. That would be great, but we don't have that resource at our ready right now.
Okay, I'll just check in. I know that Joint Rules has been working on PPEs today in various contexts. I'll check in with the Pro Tem's office about what their plans are in terms of sharing out what they get to school districts who are providing this kind of care. If there are no other questions for Superintendent Obeng, we're at about halfway through our hour. So thank you so much, Superintendent. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on.
Thank you so much for listening.
Yep. And again, should anything occur to you in terms of asks for statutory change, please let us know immediately. We did pass as a full Senate this morning, a quorum of us at least. We passed our first emergency legislation, but a second bill is coming together pretty quickly behind it. So over the next week or maybe 2 weeks, we'll be talking about that. So there's an opportunity. Okay, Superintendent Collins and Peggy, if you could unmute Superintendent Collins. Are you with us, Jean Collins?
I am. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And so, you know, from hearing Superintendent Obeng, what we're hoping to understand about what's happening in Rutland. So I'll let you pick up anywhere you want. We'll note our questions, and then the committee will ask those when you're done.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I'm superintendent in Rutland Northeast, which is a rural district north of Rutland. So I have more rural issues than Superintendent Obeng does. And I also am in regular communication with my colleagues through VSA, so I can share a little bit of what was identified today by them. So food services, I mean, across the state, I think that we're all feeling that food services is going well. My food services program is serving about 1,500 meals a day. We're delivering on a school bus a lunch bag that also has breakfast for tomorrow morning in it. On Friday, we anticipate delivering a weekend set of meals, so 3 meals. We are using our bus drivers. We have a school bus. We own our own school buses. And then we're also assigning some of our paraeducators to ride those buses to do the delivery. Yeah, just like Superintendent Obeng said, it's for any child 18 and under, and that's under the Summer Community Meals Law, which expands what we usually do during the school year. So any age, any child, as long as they're in our towns. They don't even actually have to be residents. If they were sent over to stay with their grandmother, we don't ask those questions. Just tell us what kids are in your house. So that part's going really well. The 2 areas that we have looking forward concerns on is the sustainability of that many meals on a regular basis as our staff start to either become sick or be exposed. And so we're trying to make plans for that, but I don't know. I couldn't guess how long before we hit a tipping point. Right now, we're good. The other thing is making sure that we continue to have protective gear for our food service employees and those employees who are delivering the meals. So those are the two areas of concern that we're watching, but it's working well now. Online learning, like Superintendent Obeng said, we are doing maintenance of learning for this official 2-week closure. We have prepared 2 weeks of packets, paper-based packets for all of our students, and they were either picked up by parents from Friday or were delivered to their homes on Monday with the meals. And this is work that can be tracked, but it is intended to be maintenance of skills, not new learning. Meanwhile, my staff has now shifted into, through the use of technology, working with each other by grade level to plan for continuity of learning, where first grade teachers all across the district are planning what are the end of year expected proficiencies we want kids to meet or standards, and then working backwards, what kind of activities can we give? And we're working at by grade level in case any particular teacher becomes incapable of teaching for a week or so, that we kind of have a team approach going on. So that work is happening now with my curriculum director. We're doing daily phone calls by grade level. We're having teams work together through Zoom and Google Hangout by grade level. And then we do have paraeducators who are able to still come into the schools, willing to come in and make photocopies. We are providing Chromebooks to our students who need them. And we have identified internet access for the majority of our students, but we still have about 200 families who do not have broadband access, and there is nothing we can do about that. Because it's rural, it's just, the wires just simply aren't there. So we're gonna have to provide education in a hybrid manner, even for our secondary ed students. We are aware of the families, and we're gonna do an update this week of which families cannot access online. And then we're going to need to continue to provide paper-based learning units, which does create an inequity of educational services. And so we're also struggling with what does that mean for grading? How do we handle that? So we're struggling with those questions, but we're on it. And I think that's going well too. The third mandate we have is childcare, and that is the most difficult. I disagree with Superintendent Obeng about sending staff into the homes. I have significant concern about the liability of a staff person going into a home, the workers' comp situations, including getting sick, the potential for DCF reports, false and valid. I just have significant concerns about that. We have been fortunate in Rutland Northeast to already have a partnership with a private childcare provider whom we had given Whiting School to. We're partnering with them, and they had free access to our school to provide childcare. So she is the owner of that business, is leading our efforts to track families and find out what they need. Her staff, she has okayed a few of her staff who already were licensed by childcare to provide in-home services in their own home. So for example, Becca has somebody coming to her house for her to serve. She's not going into their homes. And we are opening tomorrow, Whiting, one classroom so far, to serve students in kindergarten through 8th grade who can access a center-based program. We expect this to grow over time. Right now, essential personnel are kind of figuring it out. And many essential personnel are saying that they would prefer not to send their child to a center-based program. But we are in a quandary, and I know I'm not alone across the state with serious concerns about sending our staff into homes. There might be some situations where there's already a connection, like a one-on-one paraeducator working closely with that family. But in general, we have serious concerns about that. So we're trying to work it out. And I know that some of my colleagues are contracting with folks like the Rutland Rec Center, who is offering a center-based program and charging the school districts $40 a day or something like that. And that's the way some of the other rural districts are handling the childcare situation. So it's evolving. I have, out of all of my staff, I had 5 willing to do childcare, and that has already dropped by 1. There's a large number of the paraeducator staff who fall into the exempt employee categories, and people are being exposed on a daily basis, and so they're self-isolating or going out of commission. So I have serious concern about, again, long-term sustainability, but we will continue to provide all that we can. We agree with the goal, and we'll continue to provide that. Let me just look at my notes just for a second. Oh, you talked about, Ruth, you talked about sharing plans. Plans aren't necessarily, we are sharing plans, superintendent to superintendent, but our regions are so different, our areas are so different. So for example, what Superintendent Obeng is doing in Burlington, I could not do in Rutland Northeast, but we are, as a superintendent group and also as the curriculum directors groups, we are sharing plans across the state and learning from each other a great deal. We're kind of, we have the attitude of we're all in this together. And if somebody's figured something out, then we send it on. Most superintendent groups are talking regionally on a daily basis about what issues they're finding. And then we're sharing that back, funneling that back through VSA and sharing it out to everyone else.
Thanks so much, Superintendent Collins. I have a question about, so, you know, in thinking long-term about this, as you say, sustain.
Can I clarify the home care?
Who is this?
It's Superintendent Obeng.
Oh, go ahead, Superintendent.
Just to clarify that piece. So we had those same concerns around liability and insurance in terms of staff going into the home. So the approach we have, we're not the providers. So what we're trying to do with the home care is be the subsidy. So we provide the dollars to the families, and they contract with either some of our staff or volunteers to come into the home. So we went through our legal counsel in terms of how to do that, and we talked with our insurance carriers. So it's really us providing the subsidies to those families, and they can contract, and then so they're responsible for whatever happens with those relationships. And usually it's with people who they already know that. So
that feels a lot better. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. So that makes a difference, because we had those same challenges when we first started thinking of the idea. So, well, what about liability? And so, so just wanted to kind of share that before we went forward.
Okay, great. And Superintendent Obeng, we can all look at the plan when you send it to us. We'll make sure that everybody on our committee gets it and post it on our website, because I think it's you know, it's broad and it's you know, it's ambitious, and I think that's what we're looking for. Superintendent Collins' concerns are good ones, but it sounds like you've addressed them, legally speaking. If I can go back to Jean, the part where you were talking about sustainability of your food program because you're worried about staff getting sick, I'm wondering, in the legislation we just passed today, we had provisions that allowed healthcare professionals who had retired within the last 3 years but were currently unlicensed to come back in and perform in the emergency, and they could do telehealth and provide actual health care. So I'm wondering, are you developing you know, kind of a grand list of substitutes and or semi-permanent new staff in the predictable event that people will become sick? If so, are you getting enough of those kind of people, or should we be doing something similar to allow people who recently retired but are unlicensed to come back into the schools, say?
I don't think that you need to. Yes, we are. We're working with other community organizations who reached out and said they wanted to help. Brandon Rescue offered to help deliver food if we need it. So we're forming those relationships, and I think it's a case of bringing in volunteers.
Well, I mean, not just on the food program, but I'm thinking more with classroom instructors. You know, ideally no one would get sick, but all of the projections suggest that it'll be happening across various disciplines and vocations. So you have to assume a certain number of teachers will self-quarantine or get exposed or become ill, more so than we would have in a normal year. So I'm wondering, given that instruction is remote now, I would think the normal objections people would have to recently unlicensed people being instructors would be mitigated because they wouldn't be in physical proximity with the kids.
Right.
Thoughts on that?
It is. We are totally remote now, other than the food services and the cleaning of the schools. So our teachers are working from home, and so the exempt employees are still able to work from home unless they themselves get sick. So yes, we are aware of substitutes, and it was my assumption that a retired teacher could certainly step in for someone. We're approaching it as a team
Okay.
approach. So if if an entire first grade team goes down, I'm in trouble. But if a first grade teacher needs to be out of commission for a week, the others can step in. So we're making contingency plans around the continuity of learning.
Okay, great. And it was good to hear about food services going well. I agree. It seems across the state, Northeast Kingdom, North, South, East, West, it seems like people were able to very quickly get their arms around that. Childcare does seem to be the place everybody's struggling with. Maintenance of education seems as though it's in place. I do wonder, there are some districts, not yours and not Burlington, that are having trouble putting together their continuity of education plans and getting those online, but they have, I believe, until early April to do that. Questions from the committee for Superintendent Collins? Just say your first name and I'll cue you up.
Debbie.
Who is that?
Debbie.
Debbie.
And Ruth.
Okay, good. Ruth. Okay, Debbie, go ahead.
Thanks. So Jeannie, I have been cogitating about the equity difference between those kids who do have access to online learning and the others, as you were saying, that only have access to paper-based packets. Well, for one, I guess my first question is there anything that you think the state can do? Superintendent Obang mentioned, working with Comcast and trying to, get, can we put pressure on, I mean, this has been a perennial problem in our rural areas, though I know this has been a longstanding, issue. But do you think there's anything that could be done to improve the internet connections in your area?
I don't pretend to know how all of that works. My understanding is broadband access does not exist in areas. I've been told this morning by colleagues that Wi-Fi hotspots are not available in many cases, or they're very hard to get. So even providing a Wi-Fi hotspot, if there's a way that our carriers, I know that the carriers are doing a bit about lifting data restrictions from cell phone memberships, et cetera, and that's very helpful. But those are the only things that I know of because it's not my area. However, I will ask my IT director and get back to you.
That would be helpful. And then just my follow-up question to that then is, could you say a little bit more about how you're trying to adjust for the kids that have the paper-based packets and the kids that,
Sure. For this first 2 weeks, we made everyone paper-based, which upset our high school teachers a bit because they were dying to go online. But as we move forward, in about 10 days, we're going to have to, I assume, we're going to have to figure out how to continue this. And so we'll be assessing with parents who really does have the internet access, who doesn't, once we hand out the Chromebooks, et cetera, what is our status? And I think it'll be a teacher by teacher responsibility that you need to know who in your class does not have internet access, and you need to provide comparable and rigorous curriculum to match what the others are doing, is the way that we plan to approach it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay, great. Thank you.
Ruth.
Thank you. And thank you, Superintendent Collins. I'm glad that Superintendent Obang clarified, because my understanding of what they were doing was his understanding or his explanation of what they were doing, because I would definitely agree with you about the liability concerns. And liability is actually something I've brought up a lot when it comes to childcare, because there are a number of liability issues, at least I think there are, about school districts and private childcare providers providing this emergency care. My question was similar to Senator Ingram about the broadband access. This whole crisis just shows the cracks in our system across the board, and it's really, really stark and unfortunate. And you, superintendents and school districts, are on the front line of having to deal with the cracks in our system. So first, just thank you for everything you're doing, and I'm sorry that the system sucks as much as it does. I'm looking at the Wi-Fi hotspot map right now. There's actually one that the PUC has put out, and there are some hotspots in your area, but you'll be no surprise that those hotspots are at schools and town halls.
Yeah,
So
there are.
Yeah,
And our kids are rural, so they can't necessarily get there.
exactly. And what are they going to do? Like congregate around, the town hall to do their homework. Now I can't remember the question I was going to ask you, but so I guess I'll just say thank you. And if there's anything I can do, I know that the rural school districts have really specific issues, and I know you're in contact with my superintendents up here in Addison County. So if there's anything I can do to help, please let me know.
Thank you. Philip, I think Superintendent Obeng had something to add to what I was saying. He was trying to get your attention, but you can't see him.
Oh, okay. Peggy, can you unmute Superintendent Obeng?
Oh, I got it. No, I was just I think Jeannie talked about the hotspot and difficulties there. I know that the providers are working on it, and I forget the name of it, but they are trying to create some hotspots that's mobile that might be able to service rural areas. So you'll have to talk to the providers, but coming to an area near you soon, Jeannie.
Yeah, Jeannie, I would reach out to the PUC, and they have been in touch with legislators about the work they're doing to try to do this. So they may have some, and I can make that connection for you if you want. But you're right. They're trying to make those available.
And you are correct. We have opened up all of our school guest access to be wide open and advertise that if you come sit in our parking lots, you can, by yourself with nobody else, then you can access our hotspot.
That's great. That's a good idea. Thank you. Any other questions for Superintendent Collins from other members of the committee? Okay, Superintendent, thank you, and Superintendent Obeng. We really appreciate you taking the time to come on. I know I'm repeating myself, but we are here and we've been specifically instructed to have our ear to the ground, and if anything should come up that needs legislative work, certainly we can also help nudge various agencies, administrative agencies. So for instance, both of you talked about protective equipment for people doing food delivery and childcare, and I think that's an urgent need, and I will make sure before the end of the night tonight I have a conversation with the Senate President about that and see how best to make sure that's happening. But if anything comes up that needs legislative work, please let us know and we'll try to get it in process for the next bill that comes along. So thank you both again, and I'll let you both go and then do just a bit of housekeeping with the committee. Committee.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Committee, so bye-bye. I'm thinking that we could have another meeting this week, but it would be along the lines of the one we just had. So what I'd rather do is have everyone who can possibly do so just join the joint rules calls to keep up on the general prospects across disciplines and committees of jurisdiction. And as we go forward in the week, we'll think about maybe next week scheduling committee time. But I appreciated that you were all able to get on today, even though a number of you also went into Montpelier to to vote and to be present on the floor. So thank you for
And
that.
Bruce,
I'll
sorry,
be in touch.
Then Bruce, oops.
Yes?
Oh, I just wanted to, I was going to try and end the live streaming, but
Is-
I didn't get to do
is
that in
this
time.
Peggy?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, it's sorry,
Okay.
it's Peggy. Yep. So I'm going to stop the live stream now, okay?
Okay, great.
Okay.